All right, so before we get too comfortable, well, let me start by saying I realize this is the lunch hour, and the fact that you're here, I'm at least that much more popular than lunch. That means a lot that you'd show up during the lunch hour. And on the other hand, I understand this is a mandatory class, so there is that. But nevertheless, you do have a choice, and I'm grateful to you for showing up here today and being a part of this. And I understand that you've had some extraordinary speakers, that you do this every week, and you've got some great entrepreneurs and some leaders and some successful people who come and share their wisdom and their experience with you. It's my hope that at least one thing I share with you today will be of value to you. So before we get too comfortable, I want to start by inviting you to do a little partner exercise. So if you're not already sitting by someone, and this is the only partner exercise, so I'd like to ask you to find somebody, and you don't have to stay there the whole time if you don't want to, but if you'll at least just pair up at the beginning, and I just want to have you answer a couple questions for each other. And if you don't have a partner, raise your hand and I'll help you find one. You're good? Anybody not have a partner?
Let them sit by her.
Yeah, I figured I'll just do a threesome.
Okay, that's good. Okay, everybody have a partner. Anybody doesn't have a partner, please raise your hands. We've got one person. Where there's one, there's always more. I knew it. Okay. Awesome. You need a partner? You good? Awesome. Okay. So this is pretty simple. What I want to invite you to do, so here's how it works. You will have a partner A and a partner B. Partner A is whoever has more tattoos. No, okay, whoever has shorter hair. That's easier to tell sometimes. We don't have to get too personal here. So whoever has less hair is going to be partner A, and you're going to have a partner B. Okay, and you're each going to have about 30 seconds. That's all it is. I'll tell you when to switch. So just listen for me. And here's the question that I want you to ask yourself and then share the answer with your partner. The question is this: what am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? It could be one thing. You could take the full 30 seconds and just keep listing things you're grateful for. So go ahead and get that in your mind. And again, partner B is going to start. Okay? Everybody got the partner B? So again, you got 30 seconds from the time that I tell you we'll switch. So go ahead and go partner B, 30 seconds. What are you grateful for? Okay. Awesome. Thank you for doing that. Now, why did I start with that? I'm going to jump to the end of my presentation. I'm going to tell you right now. I hadn't planned to do that, but I felt impressed to start with that. Let me just ask you, why did we start with a little gratitude exercise? Anybody?
Put us in a good mood.
Put you in a good mood? Sure. Did it work?
Yeah.
A little bit? Got the energy up in the room? Right? Any other ideas? Why did we start with that? I'll tell you my perspective. One of the things that I've learned in my 38 years of living, and having been the son of parents who built the amazing group of companies that my parents did, one of the things that I've learned personally is that if you're not happy now, if you can't find the things you're grateful for now, more of something else later won't make you happy either. So we all aspire to be successful. We all aspire to succeed, to achieve. I don't think anyone would be here in this class if you weren't motivated by something, right? The fact that you got out of bed, you got dressed, you did whatever personal hygiene you needed to do, you organized your schedule, you got here, you showed up. That tells me something about the kind of person you are. And I suspect that every person in this room has goals of some kind. Some of you have written them down, some of you haven't. As a side note, I'd encourage you to write them down. Even if you forget about them, it's the kind of thing you find them in a drawer 5 years later, you'd be surprised how many of them came true or you've achieved. But the point is, so often we find ourselves living for someday. I'll be happy when. I'll be happy if. Man, if I just owned a sports team. If my net worth started with an M, something like that. And the reality is, often that accomplishment will bring us some measure of fulfillment, of happiness for a moment, but it doesn't last, right? So I've come to believe that the single most important decision that any of us will ever make is the decision to live in a beautiful state, no matter what. No matter what, to find the gratitude, to find the joy, the appreciation, instead of the frustration, the disappointment, the fear, the stress. Right? Somebody once pointed out to me that stress is just an achiever's word for fear. Like, I love that. You ask a busy, successful person, how you doing? I'm stressed. It's probably not stress. That's probably some measure of fear. And we all have it. But when you consciously focus, you can shift your focus, right, by just looking for what are you happy for? What are you excited about? What are you contributing? What did you learn? How are you growing? Those kinds of things, and it's a skill. I want to encourage you to think that happiness is a skill. It's a choice and a skill. Something you decide to do, something you can get better at over time. So having said that, I do want to tell you that I've got a couple copies of Behind the Drive that I'm going to give away at the end. I might do that based on who had the most interesting question. So at the end, we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and I invite you to be thinking as I'm speaking. Is there something you want to know about, something I touched on, something outside of what I've talked about that piqued your interest, and then we'll leave a few minutes at the end, even if it's only a couple questions to do that. And then I do have a short presentation. So some of it we'll go through. We'll see what makes sense. I gave some thought, but I wanted to see what felt right while we were here together. And I knew that I wanted to share a little bit about this book, Behind the Drive. How many people here, just by show of hands, have read Driven by chance? How many people read Driven? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll tell you, my father, who passed away 7 years ago, so Larry Miller, wrote, with Doug Robinson's help, his autobiography just before the end of his life. And even growing up in the same household with him and having been around him, I have to tell you, I learned an enormous amount from that book. He was just so honest, and he shared the ups and the downs and the challenges and the victories of what it's really like to be an entrepreneur and to try to live a balanced life, a healthy life. But after reading the book, I knew there was a lot more to tell. And I also knew that I wanted to write it down and capture it, or it would get lost. And so with the support of my family, I made a list of about 500 people from every aspect and era of Larry's life, from childhood friends to NBA legends to business partners to business competitors, employees, friends, family, neighbors, you name it. And I took 2 years, and I called them and I emailed them and I invited them to share just in 2 pages. What was your experience with Larry like? How did he touch your life? What difference did he make? And when I started, I consulted with some different people in the publishing industry, and one of the things that I got asked was, hey, do you think you'll have enough material to fill a book? And I didn't know, but I said, I think so. And it wasn't long before we got into the project that I was just blown away by the overwhelming response. People saying, Larry did so much for me. Like, he was like a brother to me. Like, what do you need? How soon do you need it? What else can I do? And it was really an amazing experience for a lot of reasons. So I want to share with you just a few things about what I learned doing this project. One of the things I learned as I'm talking about now is just the response of people saying, how can I help? It really caused me to be introspective and ask, what kind of person do I need to be? Or what kind of life do I need to live so that A, there's stories worth telling or that I would want told about my life, or that people would be enthusiastic about contributing those, and that people would want to read them. Tom, you mentioned that you're reading As a Man Thinketh, James Allen. That was actually a book that was near to Larry's heart, and it caused him. I'll be really honest with you here. There was a time when Larry was building his business that he was so focused to the exclusion of much of the other parts of his life, his health, his spirituality, his relationships. And he was quite intense, and at times he was even abusive. And my mom said to him after one episode, she said, Larry, if this ever happens again, I'm out of here. And she said, we need to go to counseling, and you got to change. This doesn't work. She was basically a single mom, married, but raising the 5 kids in the family while Larry's off working 16-hour days, 6 days a week for 20 years. And somewhere in this, when she gave him this ultimatum, and he said, all right, I'll go. So he sat down with the therapist, and the counselor asked him, Larry, what manner of man ought ye to be? Taking from a scripture and from this book by James Allen. And it changed him. That question, it really caused him to reflect, and that was an inflection point in his career, and he started to really focus more on expanding who he was as a person and not emphasizing so much his success in the business world. So that's one thing I learned from spending a couple years really looking at Larry's life was asking, what kind of person do I want to be? Another thing I learned in this process was really about the brevity and the preciousness of life. And why I say that is there were two people that we got a story from who passed away between the time we collected their story and the time the book went to print. One of them was former Governor Bangerter, and the other one was a gentleman named Artouche, who has an amazing story in the book about Larry loaning him $1.5 million on a handshake. It's incredible. But it's like I really feel there was something guiding the production of this book, and I saw just how life, you never know how much time you have, and to be able to enjoy and appreciate every moment, it's a different way to live. One thing I learned about this is I learned what I believe was Larry's formula for success. Right? I don't think you can boil down an entire lifetime into like a 3-step program that applies to everybody, but I definitely saw themes and I saw patterns as I collected story after story. And when I started, all I really wanted to do was create kind of a chicken soup for the soul type book, an uplifting, inspiring, humorous collection of stories. And what I discovered very quickly on was that every single story, every one, contains acts of service that Larry provided for other people. And some of them were small, like one, he drove a car to a neighbor's house whose son was interested in buying it and walked home in the snow. It's like the owner of this dealership group takes the time to go to the dealership, get the car, drive it over, walk home in a snowstorm. Or others were, a family friend had her father pass away. And Larry offered, she was from a large family, and as part of the funeral preparations, Larry knew they'd have a lot to do. He offered to drive to Logan to shine the family's shoes. And it's like, to me, that was crazy. It's like, how did Larry do this between negotiating NBA players' contracts and building new dealerships? Like, when did he have time? And it certainly answered the question for me, like, why didn't Larry come to my Little League games? Why wasn't he at my science fairs? Like, I started to understand that. But I also saw that success was something that Larry achieved through service to others. It wasn't something that Larry did after he became successful. Providing service to others was how Larry became successful. And he saw that was his context for life. Whether it was providing goods and services, selling and servicing cars to help people get to their jobs and take their kids to soccer, to Larry, that was serving people. That wasn't just making a profit. When it was buying the Jazz back in 1985, the interesting thing is Larry didn't intend to own the team. Larry was actually out with a consortium of potential buyers shopping the team, hoping somebody else would buy it to keep it in Utah. That was his motivation, to make sure the Jazz didn't leave the state. And when nobody else was willing or able to step up, he took the risk. He didn't know anything about sports franchises, marketing operations, and he already had 5 dealerships, and finance and a real estate company at that time. And he stepped up and put everything on the line in service to the community, I believe. But he did that 4 times. He took those kinds of risks to provide quality jobs, goods and services in the community, and to be able to provide philanthropy that comes from that. He did it first when he bought the Toyota store in '79, when he bought the first half of the Jazz in '85, the second half in '86, and when he built the arena in '91. Every single one of those were a time that Larry put everything on the line. And if any one of those had gone differently, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you now. So I believe that it worked out for Larry because it was service-oriented. He was in service to something greater than himself. And that gave him a power, that gave his life a context and a meaning and him a motivation that was inexhaustible. So when people would talk to me, what was it like? Was it weird? What was it like growing up as a son of Larry Miller to see your dad's name all over town and on license plate frames and ads on TV and things like that? It's like, was it weird? It's like, no, I always grew up, and it was just how it was. People would say, well, what was the secret of his success? How did he do it? And I kind of laugh inside because I think about that saying that overnight success usually takes about 15 years, that kind of thing. And for Larry, it really was, as I mentioned, he worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week for 20 years. Like, that was his routine. And when he came home, when he was home on Sunday, he was exhausted. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want to do anything. He was gone in the morning when I went to school, and he was still gone at night when my mom read me a bedtime story and tucked me in. It's like that was what he did. And that was how he achieved his success. But what it caused me to think about was the inevitable consequence of that, right? Because Larry was a teacher. That's one of the things that I'm very grateful for. Now, we can learn a lot from anyone who's successful just by looking at what they did and emulating, copying what they did. It's been said, success leaves clues. So if you want to learn how to be successful, you want to learn how to be a millionaire, find out what millionaires do. You want to learn how to have a happy marriage, find people who've been happily married for 50 years and do what they do. Like, it's not that complicated, generally, right? You got to do the work, put in the miles, as Larry would have said. But overall, it's not that complicated. But for Larry, one of the things he used to talk about, and I want to share this, by the way. So Larry established for every employee of the Larry H. Miller Group, the number 2 responsibility for every employee, be a teacher. That's interesting, right? Every single person he wanted ever, it didn't matter if you sold cars or wore a jazz uniform, he expected you to be a teacher. You might be wondering, what was number 1? Number 1 was put the legal, financial, and moral well-being of the company first. Never compromise the legal, financial, and moral well-being of the company. And we train that to every employee. And it doesn't matter where you work or how long you've been with us. But for Larry, as much as he was a teacher, what I've realized is that I learned from him in different ways. I learned things he taught. I learned ways he was that I want to emulate, and I learned ways that he was that I definitely don't want to emulate. And I'll share one of those with you now. Larry died at 64 years old. Now, when I was 18, I thought 30 sounded old. And then I got to be 30, and I didn't think 50 sounded old anymore. In fact, now that I'm almost 40, I realize I want to be skiing and running marathons and wrestling with the grandkids in health and vitality when I'm 80. Like, I want to be doing that. So when I look at Larry passing away at 64 years old, not even making it to the age of senior citizen, to me, that's a shame. And especially because he worked so hard. Now, granted, he loved what he did. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't just a workaholic, but it was his passion, it was his playground to negotiate deals and to be able to do things for other people and make things happen. But he never got to enjoy that with my mom or with the family in a way that I think a lot of us had hoped he would. And in fact, my mom has remarried. She remarried almost 4 years ago. And she's traveled to Peru and to Tanzania and to China and to New Zealand, and she's doing all the things that I think she thought she would have done with Larry, but guess what? He's not here to do it. So what that caused me to think about was, what is success? What does it really mean to be successful? And nowhere did that question become more important to me than the day that I saw my dad in the hospital just a couple weeks before he passed away, when he'd had his legs amputated due to complications from diabetes. Now, Larry used to, as a teacher, one of the things Larry used to talk about was the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow. It's a natural law of the universe. There are actions and there are reactions, actions and consequences. Well, guess what? Larry's consequences of working the way he did, spending his time and his energy, they caught up to him. And he developed a list of ailments longer than I could tattoo on my leg. But he never talked about them. So I didn't know until he'd had a heart attack. Then he had another heart attack. He was hospitalized. He was in the IC unit. Then I learned he had retinopathy. He had very severe diabetes. He had a very rare disease called calciphylaxis. He had kidney failure. He had circulatory problems, arthritis, gout. I mean, it was like, holy cow, are you serious? And then when you look back and you say, well, he was getting very little sleep. He was under high stress, poor diet, no exercise. He skipped breakfast. When he ate lunch, it wasn't particularly healthy. He drank soda throughout the day. That's going to catch up to you. And so for me, I look at his life and I look at everything that he created and all the contributions he made, all the jobs, all the enhancements to the community, all the goods and services and experience that he provides, all the tax revenue, all the scholarships, all the philanthropy, all the status, the recognition, owning an MBA team, being one of the mega dealers in the country that's recognized in the industry trade publications. And you think, that's pretty amazing, right? And then you look at, here's a man, 64 years old, on a gurney in a hospital gown, who'd lost a lot of weight. His hair was disheveled. He looked tired, haggard, and scared. And I asked myself, is that success? Is that the price of success? Because I'll tell you what, if that's success, I want none of it. I want to enjoy my life. I want to be healthy. I want to be active. I want to do the things I want to do. I want to have a good relationship with the people that I care about. I want to have a good relationship with people that I don't even know. These kinds of things. I know I want to make a contribution. Now, I'm not the judge of Larry's life. I can't tell you whether he was successful or not. And ultimately, we all have to answer that question for ourselves about what is success. But that's one of the messages that I definitely want to share with you today is what is success. And encourage you to think about that now. Because in the same way that every decision you've ever made has led you to be sitting in this chair right now, think about it. How amazing is that? Every decision you've ever made or haven't made, which is making a decision, has led you here to this moment. And that same thing will still be true next week, next year, 30 years from now. Every decision you make is taking you somewhere, closer to somewhere, further from somewhere. And we don't often, most of us I think, we don't often stop to think about that. And it's often not a comfortable thing to think about. But if you want to get to the end of your life, which of course none of us know when that will be, I think there's a Hawaiian proverb that no one promised us tomorrow, right? Or there's the other saying, no man can say for sure that he shall still be alive tomorrow, which is an interesting thought. No matter what you do, you don't know. And just to give that some conscious thought. So, okay, having said that, the last thing I want to share with you is, I want to talk about, the last thing I learned about writing this book is I started to touch on this formula, kind of a formula as I saw it, a pattern in Larry's life, that I believe was the basis of his success. So it was, do work you love. This is very simple. And I want to share this too, that Larry ultimately was an ordinary person. He was an ordinary person. But I think we have a tendency sometimes to idealize people who are extraordinarily successful, and it's like we think they're a different class of human being or something, or like they have a level of success that's never available to us. Or maybe if all the stars lined up and everything went just right, we could be that successful. But I'm here to tell you that Larry was ordinary. He was a college dropout. He had no idea what he wanted to do with his life until he was in his 30s. He was a bookbinder. He was a delivery driver. He was a brick mason. He worked at a parts department for automobiles. In fact, talking about it now, I'm thinking, what did my mom see in this guy? But it's kind of like the saying that there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. So you never know, and we all have that. So I believe that Larry, as an ordinary person, achieved extraordinary success, and that's available to each of us. I truly believe that. So the first thing, as I look at Larry, what I would say Larry's formula for success is do work you love, which we can all do that, right? There's things that we enjoy. We can find it. We can do more of that, less of what we don't enjoy. Second is to get better every day, to get better at the work you do, to get better as a human being. Do work you love is one. Two is get better every day. Larry talked about that in terms of the Japanese concept Kaizen, continuous improvement. Tony Robbins talks about that in continuous and never-ending improvement. However you say it, there's no end to growth. There's no end to learning. And then the third is to make sure that your work serves other people. If you're doing what you love, getting better every day in service to others, I believe personally that there is no way you can't not. Is that 3 negatives? There's no way you can't not be successful. You will be successful if you do work you love, get better every day, and serve other people. This is where I feel like there should be some interaction. What do you think? Any thoughts? Anything resonate with anybody? True, not true, dissenting opinion? Yeah.
So from your dad as a father, what did you
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. So the question is, as a father, what do I aspire to do differently from my dad? Well, the first thing is that I'm home for dinner. I'm home at 6 o'clock for dinner every night. And I'll put the kids to bed, I'll spend time with my wife. I'll usually do a little bit more work before bedtime, but just to be home and to be at the table and have that interaction, that's definitely one. To preserve the time on the weekends when we have the kids. My wife and I have both been married before, so we only have our kids about half the time. But when I'm with our kids, I'm with our kids. I'm not on Facebook, I'm not answering email. So that's definitely a thing. Yeah, did that answer the question? And then personally, and I'll talk about this a little bit now, some of how Larry's life has impacted me, and not just as a father, but how I'm different otherwise. Now, this is a picture of Larry's office. Okay, now I have the privilege of working from Larry's office today, which is pretty cool. That's his original desk. It's where he negotiated Stockton's contract and Malone's, and a lot of cool things happened, and there's just an amazing vibe. He worked there for about, almost 10 years before he passed away. And a great view, as you can see, it's a great view looking west in Sandy. That's the Real Stadium. This is at Jordan Commons. So there's two things here. Well, there's actually three if you count the printer, but there's a couple things here that weren't here when Larry owned and worked in this office. The first one is this computer. Larry used to talk about technology as potentially being one of the downfalls of our civilization, and he prided himself on the fact he didn't have an email address. Now, he said that tongue-in-cheek. He knew the power that it could bring to the business world and communications and that kind of thing, but nevertheless, Larry didn't have a computer. He was the kind of person that he wanted to have a relationship with you. He would call you on the phone, he would invite you in. It was very personal. The other thing was this walking treadmill. Now, I use that, and I happen to believe that if Larry had had that and he had used that, he would still be here with us today. So that's one thing that's definitely different for me. And then what I've looked at is I've thought of this saying, every life is either an example or a warning. And I think that's true. And I think a lot of lives are both. And Larry's life was both. So from Larry, the things I learned, as I said, the things that he taught directly, the ways he was that I want to be, and the ways that he was that I don't want to be. And what that has led me to is this idea and wanting to share with him. This is one thing I didn't tell you about this book. This book was the fulfillment of a promise I made to my dad. So shortly before he died, and we knew that the end was near because, as I said, he had this rare disease called calciphylaxis. And it happens in people who have kidney failure, and what it does is it actually calcifies your vascular system, and blood can no longer circulate, and your tissue dies, it turns black, it's really painful, and it's just a horrible way to die. And he knew, as he got that diagnosis, all this struggle that he'd had, he said, I'm going to quit dialysis. When that happens, the toxins will build up in your body, and the end is within a week to 2 weeks at the most. So we knew that we had about 7 to 14 days before he would be gone. And I always thought that I would just get a call one day and learn that my dad had died of a heart attack at his desk. I truly thought that was how I would learn of his passing. And as dark as that is, I was really grateful that we had the chance to know the end was near and to be able to spend time. He went home from the hospital, and literally the whole family gathered around the bedside, and we were able to be there and watch family videos and reminisce and things like that. But a couple days before he was moved home, I had the chance to sit at his bedside, and I was able to talk with him really openly. And one of the things that I said is I said, Dad, now this is wanting to connect with a dying parent, right? Like, I've never been in that situation. It's kind of uncomfortable, really awkward. And I didn't know exactly what to say, but I wanted to connect with him from my heart. And I said, Dad, I want you to know that it's been a privilege to have been your son. And I will spend the rest of my life living and teaching lessons that I've learned from you. But I know that as I do that, I will also spend the rest of my life comparing myself to you. It was one of the greatest gifts that he gave me when he said, don't. He said, don't compare yourself to me. I don't know if you're more than I am or less than I am. I really don't. But it's not important. Measure yourself against yourself. It is enough. And the generosity and the humility in those words, I mean, think about that. Here's perhaps Utah's most successful entrepreneur ever saying, I don't know if you are more than I am or less than I am. I really don't. But it's not important. Measure yourself against yourself. And I think that there's wisdom in that for each of us. And I want to invite you to consider that. And so often we compare ourselves against others. The challenge with that is we're not others. We're ourselves. We're all unique. We're all individuals. And when we do compare ourselves to others, very often we compare our weaknesses against someone else's strengths. Or we compare ourselves to somebody who's got a 20-year head start on us. It's a trap, comparing yourself to other people. Now, I happen to believe that, as I said before, each one of us is capable of greatness. I really believe that. And I've spent a lot of time in our business looking at what differentiates the best leaders, the best managers. How do people become leaders and managers? And I've studied those kinds of things. And over the years, I've come to believe that in the same way every one of us is capable of greatness, I believe every one of us is capable of being a great leader. I used to wonder, is there a certain type? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Is it a certain type on the Myers-Briggs, the DISC analysis? Or, do you have to have an Ivy League degree, or do you have to have military service, or, certain kind of whatever worldview, personality, or some people are born, some people are made, all this. I don't believe that anymore. I believe every single one of us, by being who we are, by practicing our natural self-expression, by letting go of whatever fears and beliefs and understanding that we create our reality through our thoughts, through our language, our beliefs, ultimately our actions, that every one of us is capable of that. So what I've done is I've created a seminar. Now, I'm not here to sell you on a seminar, but this is what it looks like, because I've tried to put all this into some kind of framework that I can share it with people in a way that is useful. This is what I've come up with. Be a genius, do great work, and enjoy success beyond. Now, each one of these has its own lessons and modules, and we don't have enough time to get into it today, but there's definitely one thing I want to share with you. So this is what it looks like: to be a genius, do great work, and enjoy success beyond. And when we do that, I believe that we'll experience power. And what that is, first of all, know who you are. Why are you here? Why are you in life? What is it that you want? And when you're clear about who you are and what you want, you have a power that most people won't have. The second thing is, when you are able to do great work, you align your life in a way that allows you to do that, then you will be productive and you will be successful. And a lot of people stop there. But then to go beyond that and to enjoy success beyond. And what does that look like? That looks a lot like what we talked about at the beginning, this mindfulness, this gratitude, this forgiveness, compassion, these kinds of things for ourselves and others. So I'm going to skip over a few of these slides because I want to go to one thing and then we'll go into Q&A. So I talk about be a genius, having power, purpose, productivity. This comes when you align your life in this way. Again, what Larry did: do work you love, get better every day, in service to something bigger than yourselves. I said others, but I believe this could be a higher power, this could be a community, this could be plants and animals, it could be the earth. But if you do that, that's where great work occurs, when you're able to align that. And it goes beyond a job. A lot of people have jobs. Some people even have careers. Some people find their calling. So I want to just give you that as a thought. How can you align what you love, getting better every day, in service to something greater than yourselves? If you're able to put that together, you'll spring out of bed in the morning, right? You'll be excited about what you do. You'll make a difference in the world, I believe. And then the last thing here, enjoy success beyond. Somebody once talked to me about this idea. What's better than being in the moment? Enjoying the moment. What if you could enjoy every single moment of your life? What if you could? How would your life be different? So what I want to invite you to do now, I talked about this story. This was Larry in the hospital and the success that he achieved, or perhaps didn't. This is the back of my head. So here, I want to invite you to do this with me. So this is something that I learned. I've been kind of a workshop junkie over the last couple years. So I've been traveling around learning from some of the top thought leaders I've been with. I've been to Tony Robbins, I've been to Jack Canfield, Wayne Dyer. I've gone through a lot of different seminars. This heart math is one. And what I love about this is it's so simple. It's so simple, but I believe it's so powerful to shift our experience of life. And I want to invite you to try it now. Before I do, I want to ask you to suspend any kind of disbelief and just go with it and see what you get. For some of you, it won't do much. For others, I think it'll be pretty profound. For me and a lot of other people, it is that. So here's how it works. Scientists tell us that in our hearts, we have neurons, right? The same cells that are in the brain. It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of traditions that tell us the heart has its own intelligence, but that takes it to another level, right? That there's neurons. And we see in a fetus that the heart develops before the brain. It's really interesting. And scientists also tell us that as we measure our heart rate, we are either, at every moment, either in a state of incoherence, which is the top. If you measured all of our, especially in times of stress or difficulty, it's going to look something closer to the top there. But by controlling our breathing, which is our fastest way to adjust our physiology, we can change our heart rhythm. And when you bring your heart and your head into alignment, you create a state of coherence. You make better decisions. You feel less stress. You have greater access to your intuition. And it's such a simple thing. And you can do it with your eyes open. You can do it while you're driving a car. You can do it in a business meeting, in a negotiation. You can do it to help yourself fall asleep at night. Like, it has so many applications and benefits. It's surprising. It's actually surprising. So it's very simple. I'd like to invite you to try it with me now. So here's how it works. I want to invite you to focus your attention in the area of your chest, right? Just to mentally locate it. If it's helpful, you can put your hand on your heart. Some people, I was surprised to learn, have a little bit of difficulty locating mentally their heart, but if that's you, think about your big toe. Like, just mentally kind of locate that. You can find that, or you can find your left elbow. Right? And then in the same way you found your toe or your elbow, just kind of put your attention on your heart. And now I'll say 2 sentences, and I want to invite you to do this with me. So focus your attention on the area of your heart or chest area, breathing slower or deeper than usual. Focus your attention on the area of your heart or chest area, breathing slower and deeper than usual. And that's it. It's that simple. I feel like there should be fireworks right now. So, all right, that I think is everything that I prepared, with the exception of these last couple things. By the way, I want to invite you to try that. Try it before a test. Try it before you go home tonight. Try it when you're commuting. Okay, so the last things I want to invite you, a couple more invitations I want to extend to you. And what I'm up to now. So as was mentioned earlier, Mark read, my wife and I are growing something we're calling 100% of Humanity. It's a foundation. We're focusing on supporting entrepreneurs in developing countries through loans made through kiva.org. It's kind of fun. If you're interested, you can learn about it at it's ohpoh.org, 100%ofhumanity.org. But the other thing that I'm excited to invite you to participate in, if you're interested, is Walk 50. So what Walk 50 is, and you can learn more about that at walk50.com, it's a 50-mile walk. We walk 50 miles in 20 hours. We walk from the Provo Temple to the Salt Lake Temple. We start at 5 a.m., we end at 1 a.m. Why would you do that? I love to do it because I think it's a beautiful test of the human spirit. You learn a lot about yourself. You make some friendships. It's a lot like a road trip without the car. So if you're interested, there's no cost to participate. It's one of those name your own price things. It's a really fun challenge. And I suggest to you that if you participate in it and you complete it, it will change your life. The things you will learn along the way will change your life. So anyway, I think it's a lot of fun. We do it September 10th. This Thursday will be 6 months from there. We have time for one question, maybe two, and then, so question here. Did my opinion of my dad change? No. I would say the love and gratitude I felt to my dad deepened, but my opinion of him, and I would say maybe it did because my admiration enlarged as well. I had no idea that he had done so much for so many. Because again, he didn't talk about it. Yeah, in the back. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that success is predicated on what we decide success is. What has made you successful in your eyes?
I think enjoying what I do, finding a way to use my strengths, gifts, and talents in service to other people while enjoying that. That's, to me, I believe there's no higher form of success. Okay, I know I said two. Was there another one over? You had one. Question?
Kind of similar to that one. People who are in the spotlight, giants in certain industries, I think cast a large shadow. I was just curious in how you were able to get out of that shadow because create success for yourself.
So the question, how was I able to get out of my father's shadow and create success for myself? For me, that was by being myself, because you cannot be anyone else. And it's impossible, and there's no reason to try. In fact, the more you try to make another person happy, I believe the more you'll make yourself unhappy, and you can't make everyone happy anyway. So just being authentic. And last one, very last one.
Okay, just quickly, you talked about continuous improvement. Do you have some sort of daily ritual or something you do every day that helps you improve daily? Not just at work.
I do. So I think you'll find this with every single top performer, I believe. Doesn't matter what field or industry, sports, business, nonprofit, even politics, that I believe every single top performer has a daily routine they observe, and likely weekly routines as well. For me, my routine looks like this. I wake up, I meditate for 30 minutes. If I'm, for some reason, like I've traveled, I'm in a different time zone or something, I will still meditate for 1 minute to preserve the discipline. But I do that. Then I eat, and then I'll look at my calendar for the day. I always try, I don't always succeed, in mapping out my next day the night before. And that's it. And it evolves. I have a weekly routine that's actually more important for me than that, but it starts with having my goals clearly written down, reviewing them every week, looking at what's on the calendar, preparing for the meetings. Larry used to say that even more important than the will to win is the will to prepare to win. And when we see that in life and in business, that it's not always the smartest, most talented people that succeed. In fact, it's very often not. And it's not just the people who are willing to work the hardest, but by having the willingness to prepare and have those fundamental disciplines applied consistently over time. Using your strengths, gifts, and talents, doing work you love in service to other people. If you can put all those pieces in place, and that's the joy and the journey of life. So, all right, I hope, as I said, that at least one thing I said was of value to you today. I'll stick around. I don't know if the room's available, but I'll stick around out here. I am going to go ahead and give these books to people who asked questions first and last. So I've got one for you and one for you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.